Hi, everyone. This is Dawn Richard, also known as The Awakening with Dawn, and this is to Wake Up to Real Love podcast, where we share stories of struggles and triumphs in love, sex, and relationships, along with expert advice to create more conscious connections. I am really, really honored tonight to be here with a beautiful soul named Brett Avelin. He is from Connecticut. He's married. He has 2 children. He's got a side gig of being a home inspector, but his real mission, in my opinion, of course, is he is a mindfulness teacher and facilitator for the last 19 years. So he's really done a lot of deep soul searching and just talking about what it means to be an awakened human while searching for our spirituality and searching for our meaning. So I'm sure we are going to have some deep conversation tonight, Brett. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I'm so glad to be here with you and glad to be, finding out what you're all about, and let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So I know that you're like I said, the last 19 years of your life have been really a search. And so can you tell me like what this search has been about for you?
Yeah. So I'd say initially the search in starting to practice yoga and a little bit of meditation, mostly yoga though, needing to kind of move my body, was about feeling better. I just wanted to feel better in my life. I was going through a really hard time. I had wanted to kick in and start the practice of yoga for a number of years, but was doing this and that and managed to not really do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in my 20s and I had been married for a year, and I went through a divorce after 1 year.
Wow.
And it just rocked everything. It was the
Mm-hmm.
person that I thought, I held that as just everything. I had found the one,
Right.
and then boom, it exploded. And so that was the time. That was the breaking down part for me. And yoga finally was like, I've been talking about doing this for a long time, and so I started doing it every day, like 6 days a week.
Wow.
And there was just something about it. It did something. I didn't even know what I was doing, and I just kept going to class and going to class and going to class. And before I knew it, I had met this teacher that I just loved his style and what he was offering, and I signed up to do a teacher training, really just for my own immersion and my own learning.
Right.
Um, and did that, and it just led to teaching along the way. I just was so in love with all of it and wanted to share it.
What did you love about it?
Um, well, it made me feel better. It had this sort of ineffable way of, I remember specifically walking out of some of those classes and having done the practice and for an hour and a half or longer, and I would step outside and I was just happy for no reason. I would look up at that sky. I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'll never forget just looking at the cloud and just not needing anything, just feeling really satisfied and not like wanting to do something or go get something. And I had never experienced much of that really in my life. So
Was it like a sense of peace?
absolutely, absolutely, just peace and happiness and joy, really, really for no reason. And then I would, of course, dive back into my life and go to work and do whatever I did, and then I would go do it again, and it it became like an addiction in a way, but a positive addiction, that I would just keep going back and keep going back, and And I got used to, because once I started to have that openness inside of me and that availability to just be more present, be more here, I didn't want to live any other way. You know, however I'd lived in the past, all comparatively was just not as good.
Uh-huh. So then what happened next?
I continued on and continued doing yoga, and then um, was healing from that relationship along the way, and trying to find um, a sense of forgiveness for her and a sense of what the hell I was up to now in my life, because that really had been my all. And looking back, I didn't even realize how much I had been putting that relationship ideal on a pedestal
Uh-huh.
for all of my youth, looking for that one and finally finding it in my 20s. Woohoo! And I like married her quick, and then boom, it exploded. So,
What about forgiveness for yourself?
oh yeah, absolutely. But that didn't come till later. That
Okay.
that wasn't till later. Um, I was just doing the practice, and it started to change things inside of myself. It started making me realize that I had regarded myself as more like a thinking person for most of my life.
Uh-huh.
And I think that was a way of really avoiding feeling almost anything, from
Right.
my childhood and whatever. Um, so all of that like real reflection and seeing of self and feeling and experiencing myself just started to kind of get unraveled and wake up during all of that intensive yoga practice.
What do you think you were learning about yourself?
Um, well, I would say initially I was learning how much crazy shit was going on in my head, and how many painful emotions and how much suffering was there. Like it was always there, but I was starting to become aware of it. I
Uh-huh.
wasn't like living so socked in and sort of just enshrouded by it. I started to like it was a little bit shocking, um, to see
Was
all of
it
that.
like peeling layers off of yourself?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I use the word a lot, unfolding.
Hmm.
Kind of corresponds with a yoga practice, just like
Right.
unfolding and
Right.
unfolding. And really that continues to this very day. But it's gone through so many iterations and so many transformations. I was just thinking today, I walked through, I, I teach yoga at a studio in New Haven, but I was going there. There's also a float center there, like a sensory deprivation tank place.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to do a float, and you have to walk through this place where you smell all this Thai food.
Uh-huh.
And I smelled the Thai food, and it brought back, smells can really evoke
Right.
memories.
Right.
And it evoked a memory of when that studio opened in that location 2 years ago. And I just right away was like, could feel all of those feelings of like starting to teach at the new studio, and whatever layers were there of insecurity and like, am I going to get enough students? Am I going to like that feeling, like the feeling sense of who I was at that time. And then walking in the doors today, I was like, oh my God, I've learned so much in the
Wow.
2 years
Yeah.
since then. And I've noticed that over the year, I feel like it's probably never going to end. Like
No,
I'm going to keep looking back
I hope
and be
not.
like, oh my God, 2 years ago, I didn't know anything. And then 2 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, I didn't know anything.
Isn't that the saying, like the more I know, the more I realize I don't know?
Yeah, stripping away, stripping away, stripping away.
Right.
Yeah, and doing that float was another layer, hour and a half in a total quiet immersion. It's definitely become one of my practices. Once a month, I get a free float as a teacher, So I go there, and it's amazing. Have you ever tried it?
No, I think that sounds like such a cool experience, though.
It is the most deeply relaxed I've ever been. Just everything relaxes. Like, and getting out of there, my whole system is like, whoa, kind of slow mo. It's powerful.
When you're talking about it, I just sense like it's being in the womb again.
Yeah,
Just that stillness, that peace, that not having to worry about anything because you're in the womb being taken care of, in your
totally.
gestation period.
Yeah. And just giving yourself back to that being held, like you're held by the water. The
Uh-huh.
temperature is perfect. There's nothing you have to do. You can just give and just let yourself float and just be there. It's, yeah. I mean, having a meditation practice, I think certainly facilitates it. I was talking to the owner, and he was talking about how a lot of people who are just, they've heard about this float thing, and they just come in and they just want to break from the stress and they want to just like some relief, get a little
Yeah.
taste of peace, and they find it, and it's great. But if you have a meditation background and you can navigate yourself, it's just, it's a prime accelerator to do that.
That sounds beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at some point, when was it? A fellow teacher of mine, like maybe 5 years into teaching, she invited a teacher of hers who was from India to come, and oh, my light just went out. Now I'm really in the dark. How appropriate, right? I'm here in the womb. She invited a teacher from India to come talk to us, and she was teaching something called Vedanta. I'd never heard of that. I didn't know what that was, but I really loved this teacher and this friend of mine. And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And she taught in what's called classical Vedantic style. And it uses the classic texts of Indian philosophy and the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And it breaks down and has us look at the essence of what we are in a way of like self-inquiry. Am I this? Am I that? Am I the mind? Is that really all of me? And really contemplate it. And
So it's
part of those,
that questioning.
yeah, that really honest looking at like, what is the essence of that makes up me, that I've always assumed to be me. I've always lived, everyone's like, hey, what's going on? It's me. It was in a very scientific way. Vedanta is structured to do that, which appealed to me as well. I'd always been definitely a thinker and a skeptical thinker. Not, I don't, I didn't grow up with any religion or anything. I didn't really want to go to any kind of Christian thing, even though it was around me and friends would go. I was just like, get off me with that. I don't want, don't impose that on me. I want to just be me. But once I started to have my own engagement in it and my own look at it, it started to come alive.
When
And I
it when
found,
you when you create your own meaning of it.
and my own approach to it, like,
Yeah.
okay, let's validate it, let's figure it out, and see what's real for myself. So part of those meetings, there was meditation in it, and so I started to do that. And because of the yoga and the last pose in particular, the Savasana, it started to be easier for me. If I started with meditation before yoga, I would have like, just too much, too crazy.
Too intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a world in us that is going a mile a minute. If we've never done anything like that and we stop and we look, it's more than a monkey. It's like a wild horse, like
Yeah.
just running, running, running.
Yeah.
But she created a really nice container for it, and I started to do it some more on my own and enjoy it some. Yeah, it was really a beginning of doing that. And that has progressed. It has stayed with me until I found another teacher in 2006 who, and and all of this mindfulness and meditation stuff, it's like we're all living here in the West. We don't have a tradition. We don't have elders to tell us like, oh, this is how you do it, and this is what it's about, and like we're
Right.
all trying to piece it together. So
Right.
I was hearing about things like about Buddhist this and all these different things, like, oh, just like putting it together and piecing it together. And this one teacher who had a really big impact on me was essentially about just find this radical place of acceptance for your experience. And that was like his whole thing. And it touched me deeply. Like it was another layer that just kind of realized that I had never, you asked about forgiveness earlier. It brought that out in me and brought me to tears. Like it brought me to my knees, seeing how I had never, ever accepted myself, like for real, all of me, and seeing the parts. It's like when he somehow with his words touched that part in me, it made me see all of these levels of and instances, like specific instances in which I had caused my own suffering all the
Right.
way back,
Right.
all the way back, all the way back. And so that self-acceptance was huge, and it became my steady practice and my way of not just self-acceptance, but acceptance of the way things are, not doing my best to not resist that, to not push against it.
Isn't that sort of what Savasana is? At the end of your yoga practice, it's full surrender to what is.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Shavasana literally means corpse pose.
Right.
So it's like a dying
Right.
to your practice and to whatever that was, but even more so, like just letting it. Yeah, it's a great introduction for me and for lots of people. After you've kind of exhausted your body a little bit, you've worked it, and you're a little bit tired, you don't have as much going on, and you've focused your attention for a certain amount of time, you're more receptive to just lie down.
Right.
And you don't have to sit up and have the right posture, and your knees don't ache. You can just lie there and take it in.
I think that Shavasana, I know when I've been doing yoga for the last numerous years, and it was especially healing when I was going through the hardest time in my marriage. And
Mm,
I, during Shavasana, almost every time I would just burst into tears because
mm,
it was this sense of I can stop thinking about all of the shit that's going on in my
mm-hmm,
life. And this is
mm-hmm.
the only place where I can just surrender and be and just
Yeah,
accept exactly who I am, exactly in this place that I am.
yeah. Yeah, that same teacher who touched that self-acceptance button in me, he found it, and he touched it, and it brought forth these layers of grief and these layers of crying for multiple days.
Yeah.
Um, and I went up to him and I said, "What's going on?" Like, because
Explain this to me. It doesn't make sense.
yeah, it was shocking and alarming a little bit. I'm like the tears just kept coming and coming, and because it really felt like a lifetime of
Yeah.
stored
Yes.
tension. And
Perhaps many lifetimes.
yeah, right. Who knows? And he just was so helpful. He said it's like you can think of it like a shower. It's like the grief that comes through is just washing over. It's washing over.
Yes.
It's washing over and it's cleaning you. And I was like, oh, thank God. And it's been that ever since. Like, grief is one of my touchstones, when I know that something has been arising in me, some pattern, some layer, in India they call them vasanas. If it's being met, if it's being seen, and this is like without words, it'll just sort of spontaneously happen.
Right.
And the grief will come. The tears will come in the middle of the day. It doesn't matter when it is. And I'll feel it just like, for a little bit, it'll wash through. Not all the time, it has its own rhythm, but it was a great gift to be able to receive that understanding from him, and that okayness, as a man.
That acceptance.
Yeah. And that grief is really grief is awesome. Grief is
It's
and
pure.
necessary.
It's purifying.
Yeah. Yeah. It now feels like an absolutely necessary part of life to me. And I certainly would never impose that upon someone else. But I can see it as a missing piece for many, many people. Not knowing how to grieve, or even to see the pain that we carry, unknowingly carry it all around in us, and try
Right.
to like keep going around making our life work and control things, and all of that. It's painful, and like our soul, our essential self, wants to be free. It doesn't want, and it's just painful to hold all of that, and not let it out, not let it
Right.
through.
Right. I mean, that's why so many people manifest all these physical symptoms, because they don't know
Yep.
how. We're not taught, unless your parents have a really high emotional intelligence quotient. We're not really taught, in school or in our families, of how to deal with our emotions. And
Yeah.
so, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've really tried to do with my own kids. And you can speak about this, how you have tried to teach this very important life lesson to your kids about how to deal with your own emotions, how to honor them and not try to hide them and suppress them, but really figure out ways to express them and process them and use them as guideposts to show you where you need to go in your life. Maybe what things you're being guided to based on what you're feeling in your body with your emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much wrapped around that topic. Even just talking about it, like, it immediately brings it to mind. Um, it's not something that I hold strongly right now, but it's like sort of a memory of how many people regard feelings and emotions as something that's like fluffy or weak, or um, soft, or all these like,
Useless.
yeah, just like, oh yeah, yeah, get over it,
Get
move
over it.
on, like
Right. Get over it.
all that stuff. Like, there's so many messages in our society, in our culture, that look to really dampen, avoid, distract,
Right.
get on with it, move on,
Right.
all of that, versus like, what's it like to stay here? Let's
What's
stay
it like
here.
to actually experience what you're feeling instead of hiding from it or running away from it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the mindfulness training, um, so after being with him, and loving that work that he offered and he shares in the world, his name is Adya Shanti. um, it was wonderful, and I wasn't really looking for anything else, um, along those lines. but life had its way, and a friend of mine just 2.5 years ago recommended this book. It's called The Science of Enlightenment. And I got the book, and I have stacks of this kind of book.
You see my bookshelf back there? Same thing.
all loaded up.
Yep.
And many of them end up, sitting on the bedside table. I've read like a chapter or half of it or
Right.
whatever. And this one I read all the way through, and then I read it through again, like all the way through, which is exceedingly rare. Like in the last decade, I don't think I've done that with any books.
And it's called The Science of Enlightenment.
The Science of Enlightenment.
Okay,
Yep.
Writing it down.
And his name is Shinzen Young. He's a Westerner, and his lucidity and his mind is very scientific, but his experience and his sharing is very deep and powerful. And his system, what he's basically done is, he's traveled extensively. He speaks like 5 languages.
Wow.
He's sort of mind-blowing, including like Lakota. He speaks like native Lakota and Chinese. He speaks Japanese. And he's taken these different world wisdom traditions and not dumbed them down in any way, but made them accessible to the modern vernacular and modern understanding. He's kind of just translated it into our modern way. So for instance, like you hear about gratitude and what that is, and he has that in a quadrant. And you hear about a lot of people think about mindfulness, they think about like follow your breath, and like, is that mindfulness, or like, what is mindfulness? And he just breaks it down into a very simple, easy to understand way, and had me understand that, oh, so what I've been doing, this radical acceptance, is actually is one way to do it, and it's great, and we all can find our own way, and that may change over time. But it gave me this palette, as I read the book, and then I was drawn and I did the 12-week training. I really just jumped into it. I just loved it. So that we have choices in what mindfulness means. And it basically comes down to learning 3 skills of concentration, clarity, and equanimity, which is the acceptance piece, which is a different word, equanimity. And that whatever we do in our daily life, or if we have like a more formal thing, is about honing those skills so that we have the ability to be here. I choose to be here with you having this conversation right now. But at the same time, there's clarity, hopefully, as much as possible.
Right.
In the background, there might be a sense of like, oh, time is going by, maybe I have to get home. But I can see that and be like, let that, all right, but I'm here. I'm choosing to be here. That's where my concentration is. And if something else arises that's uncomfortable, maybe we're talking about something, it's like, oh, I feel exposed or whatever, then the third piece is equanimity, like having equanimity with all aspects of ourselves, the best that we can, So that's where it's all led to, all of this, and becoming a mindfulness trainer and facilitator, and doing my own podcast and putting that out into the world.
And so how has this practice, your video just went out, by the way. There you go. How has this practice affected your marriage?
I can't even, it's like, it's affected it. I wouldn't have a marriage. Just simply, there wouldn't be a marriage. We wouldn't be together without this. Even from the early years, I met her right around when I started sitting with that Vedanta teacher, and I started sitting a little bit on my own. And we met, and I was still nursing my broken heart. Um, and I was, I was into her. I was attracted to her, but I wasn't thinking like long term. I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm into my yoga. That's what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And part of me was like, okay, you should just break this off because this is not, it's not fair to her, and you're not serious about this, and it's probably not the right one. And comparing it to the old one, and the perfect, ideal image, which ultimately was my mom, the mom replacement thing,
Yeah.
like to a T. But I would take that doubt and that questioning, and it was like a kind of a uncomfortable thing in me, like, I shouldn't do this. And I would just stop and I'd sit with it. And every time I did, this like tiny little voice, it would be like, just stay, just stay with her. And it didn't have any like supportive evidence. It didn't have any like reasons.
Where's the data, says the thinker.
Like, what do you mean? It doesn't add up. Like, I don't have this and this and this, and this over here looks so much better, and I could go over here, and I was like, what do you mean just stay?
Right.
Like, but that's what it was. Like, it was like instructions. And I was like, okay, well, all right, I'll stay a little bit. And then, a month or whatever, a couple months later, I'd have the same doubts and the same. And a dear friend of mine who ran a yoga studio there, she said to me one day after we'd been together for like 6 months or so, she's like, you guys are gonna get married. Like, she just had this sense, it was like going directly at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way. But it's yeah. And a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, my wife surprised me. When you get somebody else's opinion, reflection of you, it can be it's interesting, right? We all have our own lens on the world, and
Right.
we only know each other unless if we share it. And she said something to the same extent. She's like, oh my God, if you hadn't been doing this work all these years, she's like, you are so different. Like, she's like, I don't think we would have been together if you were that same person, that I
Wow.
met, that I was attracted to and into, but um had a lot of baggage, had a lot of layers stacked up of protection and defense and insecurity and um, self-centered, like, smallness
So
that
what
has.
so what struggles have the two of you had together as a couple?
mm, our sex life has been um, something we've had challenge with from the get-go. And that was one of the things that would cause the doubts. Where is that instant hot and heavy comparing to other people I've been
Fireworks.
with, and where are the fireworks, baby?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, and so really what the the experience with her has been, and the struggles, what I've cut the whole thing, how I've come to regard it, is that it's been like, for real, legit, a master teacher for me in learning how to really love someone. Like, and what I mean is, um, all of them. I mean, you can say the words like, warts and all and whatever, but like, for real. And I look back at when we were first together and how I just placed so many inner requirements on who she should be. She should be
Like
this.
living up to your expectations
Yep.
of how you think she should be rather than just accepting who she is.
Yeah. So the mindfulness has allowed me to see those parts of myself that put that on her and take responsibility for some of those aspects. And, it ain't over. I still, I still have some of those tendencies. Um, the work with it continues, but it's been rich. It's been, and like anything, our relationship has ups and downs and connection and then disconnection, and we go through these periods. But the fact that we're both, at some point or another, I mean, early on, I remember it being so hard and such a struggle to like get into like a disagreement and like this hard place, and because I didn't want to feel shit, like I was all freaked out. I didn't know how to do that. And so we go through like 3.5 hours of this like push and pull and tug and pain and to like then at the end of it just say something simple like, I just want to be loved. Or like,
Wow.
I just want, I was just scared. Like some little saying like that after 3.5 hours, and then everything would just go
Yeah.
gone, gone.
Wow.
Like to get to that place of just being vulnerable and real, of like that little person inside of me or in her that wanted to just say that thing and like wanted to be heard. But so now it's very, very different, and having those interactions mindfully and speaking my truth and getting vulnerable, and it's still never like super easy, but it's much easier than what it used to be. So now we're more fluid in doing that, and it's not like this old big scary thing like, oh, let's have a talk, let's schedule to have a talk. It's time to like do that thing like,
I don't want to have that talk.
this is going to be terrible, I don't want to do the talk. Now it's just part of life. It's like, we don't have it a regularly scheduled thing in our calendar. But you know this spring we went through a period of being really busy and having old patterns of feeling disconnected and feeling cold and feeling distant, and
Yeah.
we call it being in China. After this singer-songwriter, he has this song about that. He's like, oh baby, how long you going to be in China, and that's what it feels like, right? When you're with your partner but you're not connected,
Yeah.
it feels like you're in China, and it hurts. It always hurts. It always feels, and we don't know how to get back. It feels like a 3,000 miles away, but there's always
Yeah.
a way back.
How do you learn to face each other? Because this is the issue that I had when within my own marriage, because when we were having these conflicts, it was definitely this more turning away from each other instead of
Mm-hmm.
turning towards each other and saying, no matter
Mm,
what's going on with us, our relationship is bigger than the problem that we're talking about. Our
mm.
love for each other, our connection that we feel to each other, even though we're feeling disconnected right now, that power is greater than whatever we're talking about. So how do you do that with each other?
Well, that way of looking at it, we found our way into that um, about a year about a year ago. That explicit way of defining it as like the relationship container or like a third entity. What are we putting into this relationship? What do we want from this relationship? And like sort of
Right.
having this as this um, thing that's held, and that we can safely sort of put our needs and our wants into this relationship container. Doesn't mean they're all going to be neatly met, but it takes the onus off putting it all on the other person.
Right.
Putting that into the relationship container.
That both of
But
you have to take some responsibility for making those things happen. together.
Yeah. And a recognition that it's valuable. It's valuable that we take responsibility and we do the work and we take the literal time out of our life or whatever it is to keep contributing to that staying alive.
And that
Because
includes sexually.
yeah, and we're still not that good at it. When times are busy and times are hard, we revert. We go back to the old way. We turn away. And I think that's part of our system, our survival based mentality
Right.
and strategy of like, when times are wild and stressed, it's easier to kind of turn away. Don't be vulnerable. Don't be open. Don't be, just keep going, do more stuff, distract, watch Netflix, whatever,
Avoid.
instead of having sex, like instead of making the time to do that, because there's too much built up. There's too much in there. Avoid.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's a work in progress. But
Always.
the other aspect of it was about a year ago, and I've been on a men's call with 4 other men for the last 5 years, mostly every week. And there are 4 other powerful, amazing, beautiful men. And we bring each other to bear in a really loving but like direct way for whatever's going on for any of us. And one of them really helped me a little over a year ago decide, really make the conscious decision that this relationship, yes, it's about me, and yes, it's about her, on just a basic human level, but it's something I've decided that it is another way of honoring the divine.
Mm.
And that, again, it's like I didn't grow up with any of this shit. This is all like, to actually like move and like to actually do that is so far from where I've come, but it's becoming more natural and more, because at first, I mean, early on in our relationship, I think we got a book about tantrism or something. We like trying it out, but it just felt like, I don't know, like playing in the sandbox or like just doing
Fake.
something.
Fake.
Yeah, like let's try that tantrism, honey. Here's the move. Ready? We'll do this. Like,
This position.
yeah. Do you feel the divine now? Is it happening? No, I don't. I'm not feeling it.
I'm feeling something, but it ain't divine.
In fact, it's pretty awkward. I think we should let's go back to the old way of just like scromping it out. How about that? So that conversation with him and that impetus to really expand my, and it wouldn't be possible at all if I didn't have my own sincere connection with what I call a divine or spirit or source or God, or call it anything. If that wasn't alive and real in me, it wouldn't be possible at all to bring this relationship and have it touch into that. But it is possible, because it's become the central force woven into my life. Everything, every day, whatever I'm doing. I mean, I can forget for a few minutes here or there, but it's basically this touching in, this allowing through of life, and all these different practices are just melded into the way that I live, mindfulness, whatever. So bringing that into our relationship and into our sexuality, we didn't do it but it's time to up it up again, bring it back up, and because for a little while, it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome. It wasn't like, I can't say there was like juicy sex in there, but there was juicy connection. Like we were doing really simple things, like holding hands, but being really like connected in doing that. And sort of,
Yeah.
we would meditate some before it, or we'd put hands on each other's heart and just stay with that, and be willing to like learn how to like really honestly connect with another human being in the body. Um,
That
so it feels like,
presence with another
yeah,
person is
it's
really when you
profound.
have that communion
Yeah,
where it's
yeah,
like you're not just joining bodies, you're joining body, mind, heart, soul.
yeah. Which I think, I mean, ultimately, I think that's what sex, why we like it so much. When it gets wild and the pleasure gets really high, we forget about ourselves. We
Yeah,
join, we unify.
right.
It's like, oh, I'm lost with
Oh
you.
God.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, that's what we want. We want to lose ourselves to find ourselves.
Right.
And if the other person is a vehicle for that, if it's really hot and we're just wild and lost, we attribute it to the other person, and it is that to a certain extent, but it's not a very conscious way of doing it. It's just like bashing about and trying to get our hormonal levels up to a certain level where we can transcend ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered a lot.
That's a lifelong um, journey. Like, people, I think a lot of people have these expectations of their partner, you know,
Hmm.
and especially when you're with somebody for a long time, there's that familiarity that sort of breeds a sense of, oh, I already know what's going to happen, sort of thing. Like I think that presence when you have with someone, when you connect
Yeah.
in a sexual and heart way, is
Hmm.
that that you both are coming to the experience as new people every time, because every day you're evolving, right? Every day you're changing a little bit. So your mindset or your perspective, or how you've dealt with your own emotions, all of those things make you different. Your
Hmm.
vid every all those things make you a little bit different. And so if you can approach your partner and all of these circumstances as someone new, even though they may be familiar, there's still places in your partner that are yet to be explored.
I would take it even further and say the very nature of what your partner is unknowable,
Yeah.
and what we are is unknowable.
Yes.
And you're exactly right. To the nature of our mind is to sort of define and hold something as I know,
Right. Put
including
it put them in
ourselves.
a little box.
And ourselves too. We get bored with ourselves. We always want the like craving new experiences, new stimulations, because we're like, I know what this is. I know what life is about, and I know what this is, and I just want more experience and more, whatever. Versus when we are whatever, however we do it, through whatever technique or mindfulness or yoga, or we're able to drop even a little bit into the unknown, which is our being. There's a freshness, like in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about beginner's mind. Like that's why, to like start over with your partner and start over continually. I mean, that can sound really trite, and if we try it intellectually, it is. It's like, okay, beginner's mind, but our mind doesn't know how the fuck to do that. It
Right.
hasn't. It doesn't do that game. It does the I know game.
Right.
It doesn't know the I don't know game, and it doesn't see any potential value in it either. But we do. stepping out of that yoga class in a simple way, it just like, because when some of these clouds of self part, we can be with life and with our partner in a fresh, beautiful, satisfying, fulfilling way, but we're not doing it. Like, it's not something we do. It's not something we even know. Like, it's a mystery, that mystery is alive. It's good.
I think it's something that we are. And if we focus more on the being rather than the doing,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the place.
That's the place. That's the pocket.
That's the
Yep.
place.
It is the place. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. And, probably it's true for most people, but I've personally needed to get my ass kicked for 20 years and get humbled like crazy.
Yeah.
To find it, to continue to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong
yeah.
journey. It's never done.
Yep.
It's never done. There are constantly parts of yourself that can be, discovered. Constantly being discovered, rediscovery, re-remembering.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's an awesome, awesome, awesome journey of discovery. It's incredible. Yeah. If I often think, if I hadn't found, quote, found this way, this that I think is still pretty rare on this planet. I don't think there's that many people. I certainly walk around, I don't see that many people like me living in
Yeah.
Connecticut and like diving into this.
Right.
But if I hadn't, I would be maybe dead, not married, certainly addicted to probably some serious things, and just miserable. I'd be fucking miserable. So it this way of living has given me a chance to be alive and be it just gets richer as I go. When I look back, walking in that yoga studio, I look back with compassion at like who I was a couple of years ago, and yeah, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Keeps going.
It's not just surviving, just going through your day status quo. It's really feeling alive and thriving and seeing life and yourself through new eyes every day.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's a blessing. It's a real blessing.
This has been a beautiful conversation, Brett.
Yeah.
You were going to say something. What were you going to say?
I was going to say the battery in my phone is starting to run low.
Okay.
We should start wrapping it up.
Yeah. So, this was deep. I knew it would be.
Yeah.
I knew it would be. And I really appreciate you being here. You have brought a lot of things to think about, things to ponder, ways of figuring out how to be in the world, how to show up in the world, how to show up with your partner, how to show up for yourself. So
well,
thank you.
It's lovely to share, and thanks for bringing me on and being with me. I knew it would be deep too. Yeah.
You are welcome to come anytime.
All right. Come back to your parlor. Indeed.
Yeah. So if anybody would like to get a hold of Brett and learn more about mindfulness, how can they reach you?
You can go to my website, which is information, redoing it now. It's called Mr. Mindful Mojo. .com. I have a podcast as well that's called Just Mindful Mojo. For getting that mojo back in a mindful way.
So that you can truly live.
Yeah, let's get our mojo on. This isn't about some living in some spiritual cave somewhere and just, I mean, you can do that for a while, but ultimately all this stuff is so that we can be alive, we can be connected, we can enjoy each other and truly enjoy ourselves and not be enjoying ourselves for the sake of like what we get and what we earn and what we accumulate and what we like. Yeah, that gets old.
Yeah.
We want to really like get to the good stuff.
Yeah. The good stuff, which is really, it's all in here.
It's simple. Yeah, we got it.
Simple. It's simple. All right. So if you like what you heard today, please subscribe and share with a friend or several. And if you would like support in finding more connection, expansion, love, and acceptance in your relationships and with yourself, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Awakening with Dawn. Feel free to send me a message, and I'd be happy to help you find and create more real love in your life. And basically, like Brett and I were talking about, it's like the most important thing. The most important part of all of this is coming back to yourself. So what I like to say is the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself, so that you can be the kind of partner that you want to have. So thank you again so much, Brett, for joining me. It was a pleasure and an honor. And again, you are welcome back anytime.
Excellent. Thank you too.
All right. Thanks, listeners. Namaste.
All right. Namaste. Bye-bye.
All right. See you guys next time. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.